Now, federal politics. Cabinet ministers have taken aim at the leaker of a top-secret defence document that has escalated tensions within an increasingly fragile coalition government. Panellist Greg Sheridan broke the story, and his report referenced several sections of a draft defence white paper produced while Tony Abbott was still Prime Minister. The Australian Federal Police are investigating the leak. Liberal frontbenchers are not happy, and Mr Abbott, for his part, says it wasn't him.
Playing politics with national security, I think, is a very, very dangerous and disappointing thing to have occurred. But it's I think very reassuring that the Prime Minister has risen above, as he does, on these things.
Obviously, anyone who releases classified information isn't trying to be helpful.
Whoever leaked them, it is not honourable behaviour. I think it's a big jump to suggest that it was a parliamentarian.
It's a criminal offence.
Some fairly robust reactions to the storm that you've created today, Greg Sheridan, yesterday, in fact. Now, you've said it was not Tony Abbott that leaked you the document, but you understand that people being gravely suspicious about the circumstances in which you can be quoting him. Obviously, he was involved at an early stage with the story. Is that correct?
Well, Julia, you know, you've got to let me put a few things in context here.
Okay.
First of all, who gets a secret leak and then quotes the source in the story? I mean, I would have thought any journalist with 5 minutes experience would know that you never quote the source. You go with your information to someone else to comment on that information. But second of all, I've never said in print or on air that I have that document. I said I'd seen bits and pieces of it. Third of all, defence white papers have been leaked since Adam was a boy. We, at The Australian, we published almost all of the 2013 Defence White Paper. One of my brilliant colleagues got hold of it. It was a live document. I mean, the document I'm talking about is a historic document, no longer has any relevance. This was a live document, and it didn't excite any police investigations or any of these sanctimonious denunciations from cabinet ministers. And fourthly, there were only 2 data points out of the draft white paper in the whole story. One was that the draft white paper said we'd get the first of the new sub in the late 2020s. That was already on the public record because Kevin Andrews, in a press release on the 20th of February last year, said we would get the first of the new subs in the mid-2020s. And the other data point was that the amount of money contributed in the Turnbull white paper is about the same as in the draft white paper. Now, on those 2 data points, no one in their right mind, no one living on planet Earth could consider that either of those data points is a threat to national security. This is a preposterous beat-up, partly designed to direct attention away from the fact that the Turnbull government has decided to change the previous position, the previous public position of the coalition government, which was that we would get the first of the new subs in the mid or late 2020s and put it out to the 2030s now. Now, all kinds of industrial and security consequences flow from that, and that debate, which is all I'm interested in, I couldn't care less about Turnbull versus Abbott, but I care passionately about the subs. That debate has been obscured by this nonsense debate.
No, but the reason it's crucial is because of the situation within the coalition at the moment. And you're a seasoned journalist. Tony Abbott is a seasoned politician. You have something that's leaked, whether in total or in part. He's quoted in it, not just saying, oh, I don't know, that's an interesting point, but saying he is flabbergasted.
No, here's another fact, Julia.
Yes.
Here's another fact. Here's another terribly important fact.
He used the word flabbergasted.
Was not commenting. No, Abbott was not commenting on the draft white paper. He was commenting on the change in the public position of the coalition, right? This was the public position explicated in press releases by the then Defence Minister, Kevin Andrews. That position was changed in the Turnbull white paper. I asked him about that change in the public position of the government, and he responded to it. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the draft of the white paper, which simply reinforces what we already knew was the public position of the coalition until the new white paper was released.
Yes, that's right, even though Colonel Binskin says that it was always 2030. But I think just before we move on from this particular
look at the press release.
question...
Don't take my word for it, Julia.
Okay.
Just go and get the press release from February 20. I promise you I'm not making this up. Let the men in white coats come and drag me away if there is not a press release. February 20, last year, Kevin Andrews, Defence Minister...
Right.
Yeah, but I'm telling you what was in a government press release. Now, it may well be that the some of the public servants were giving advice to the Abbott government. The Abbott government was saying that advice is not good enough. But you know who decides when we get subs? The government, not the public service. And the government's position, declared public position, was mid-2020s.
OK, now, but just before we move, I want to talk to the rest of the panel about this as well. But I guess that what Mr Abbott's colleagues would be interested in knowing, that given that he was at least aware that you were going to be publishing something that was potentially, damaging to the government or embarrassing to the government, as it has been perceived, did he ask you not to proceed with the story, or did you have his full cooperation with it?
Of course not. I wouldn't have proceeded with it if he'd asked me not to.
But he cooperated by giving you a quote.
Comments.
He cooperated and enhanced the story.
Yeah, of course he did. And so if you don't like what he said, that's fine. That's between him and Turnbull. It's got nothing to do with me. I ask politicians all the time to make comments about things. And what am I supposed to do? Say, look, it's very wicked of you to make such a controversial comment.
No.
I don't want to publish it. For goodness sake, don't you dare say such a thing.
His colleagues would not be saying that. That restraint would not be incumbent on you, perhaps, but on him in the interest of the coalition position. But I just want to talk to Ben Oakwest. You've been around the political traps for some time. How do you read this?
Well, firstly, it puts a lie to Abbott's big claim when he left the Prime Ministership there'd be no sniping. Now, you can argue over a lot of things, but this is clearly sniping. And it's on, isn't it? And this is getting a more and more dangerous time for Malcolm Turnbull. We're getting close to the election. Looks like a July double dissolution election. We're getting very close to it. And Abbott's kind of in open warfare with Malcolm Turnbull. And, it feels like it's just such a rerun of the Kevin Rudd-Julia Gillard fiasco. But, of course, in one respect, it's very different in that I don't think there's the appetite from anyone substantial to go back to Tony Abbott, whereas there was for Kevin Rudd because he was seen as popular. You're not going to get that transaction for Tony Abbott. Yes, maybe he still wants it. Maybe there's a rump like Erica Betts that still wants him back and to roll Malcolm Turnbull, but there isn't that dynamic where they think, well, at least he'll do better in the polls than Malcolm Turnbull. So you can only think, unless it's complete self-delusion from Tony Abbott, that this is about bringing the house down. This is about saying, I am so angry, I want to wreck it. And whatever the ins and outs of who leaked what and whether Sheridan's got a serious national security cabinet breach or not, it's clear that Tony Abbott is playing a wrecking game. He's back to being a big wrecker, and that's a big problem for Malcolm Turnbull now.
Now, but I just want to address the question of leaking. You've had a lot to do with employment law, Kate. How do you interpret the rigorous investigation in this case of how it was leaked, and what is the responsibility of the employer?
Well, the difficulty always is how do you find out who the leaker was? And we've got criminal laws that make an offence to leak information of this kind. We've got laws that apply to public servants that if they leak, there's breaches of codes of conduct. And what I find fascinating is that as soon as the leak's announced, let's have an investigation, as if it's going to reveal the secret leaker, whereas the damage is done when the leak is done. So if I was looking at it from an employment law context, I'd say, what is the damage to my business's confidential information? Who's responsible? And let's fix it right away. But in the political climate, I think the issue really is what damage can the leak do with the prospect of ever getting to the bottom of who the leaker and the context of the leaker. We'll never know.
But surely every journalist who has any self-respect at all is in favour of disclosure. Surely it's a good thing that the public knows about that sentence, which has no national security consequence at all.
No.
Was in the draft white paper. Or are journalists now only in favour of leaks that they agree with?
No, and look, I'm all for journalists having their sources and the like. There's a very significant difference between a whistleblower who's reporting on matters or disclosing matters that really go to corrupt conduct. That's a leaker you agree with? No, that's a whistleblower who needs protection. But leaking for the sake of stirring, and that seems to be the issue here, as Ben said, You've got to
Do
look
you
at that
think
a
it
little
could
bit
be
differently.
because someone had a concern about the submarines? Look, I couldn't care less about Abbott versus Turnbull, but I do care about the submarines. We've just decided we're not going to get new subs until the 2030s. Don't you think that's of some public interest?
It may or may not be.
Well, we'll definitely want to keep talking about it. A journalist, you're absolutely right, Greg Sheridan, do love
You love
leaks.
a leak.
Yes, and of course we
lawyers
all
don't.
would love to run the leaks as you did. Now, we also love new ideas at the Drum. Here's a